Hey guys, Cedrick here at cedrickcourtois.com. Today I'm going to walk you through the process of preparing, cleaning up, and more importantly, reduce the size of a Protools session folder before you send it or upload it to, say, a mixing engineer. I'm having to walk clients through the process either over the phone or email, and it's not an easy task. So I figured I'd make a little clip. I can simply send them to it. Having a visual explanation usually helps with the process, so I hope that's what this little clip will do. Now, obviously, the idea here is to speed up the upload time as well as reduce the amount of online storage required for any given project. If you're working on an entire album, 10, 15, maybe 20 tracks or 20 songs is definitely not unheard of. Now, this is going to be a Pro Tools only tutorial, meaning the source session as well as the destination DAW will be Pro Tools. And I want to mention it because when multiple DAWs are involved, some of the process is going to be a little bit different. In any case, I would say that you definitely need to communicate with the parties involved. Before you spend a bunch of time trying to prepare a session the wrong way, make sure that you either pick up the phone or send an email. In this day and age, several people could be working on the same project, different corners of the country or even the planet. So communication is key. You want to make sure everybody's on the same page. It saves sometimes hours of guessing time and a lot of frustration. So communication is key. Now, for example, today, as you can see, I picked a pretty heavily edited session. There are quite a bit of first of all, different tracks. I can see a bunch of cuts on the different tracks. If I look at my playlist, for instance, on this guitar track here, see there's a bunch of different takes of this one guitar track, so I'm only going to assume that it's the same for everything else. If I look at my drums, playlist-wise, yeah, we got 2 or 3 tracks per drums. The vocals are probably the same. So, this is a good indication that the session folder is probably pretty loaded. Now, let me double check. Yeah, this is a session at 44.1, so, I doubt we'll break records here size-wise for that folder, but still, there's quite a bit of tracks, quite a bit of takes on each of those tracks. So, like I said, it's a good indication that we have a lot of extraneous files right here that we're not going to need for the actual mixing session. But take a look at the actual session folder itself. There it is. And I look at the info. Looks like we're close to 4 gigs. So even though that's not, like I said, record-breaking size, it's still probably at least twice what we're going to need for the mixing session. So let's take a look at how and what we can do to reduce the size of that folder. Now, our source session needs to be what I would call a mix-ready session. What that means is all the different edits needs to be completed. For instance, all the comp tracks should be done. Now, if you don't know what a comp track or a composite track is, you may want to try to find some tutorial online and get familiar with the process. But in a nutshell, it simply means the best of the different takes of any given instrument. For instance, if I look at this vocal track right here in the different playlists, it seems like this top track right here, which is the main playlist, is made of chunks of the different takes that you see underneath it. And the idea here is that every single bit right here, every single clip is the best of each of those takes, or at least that's the idea. And the main playlist here becomes your comp track. You do that for vocals, drums, guitars, etc., etc. So again, if you don't know what that means, refer to different tutorials. That needs to be done. Other things that need to be done are MIDI instrument track. All those need to be bounced on their own audio tracks. Same with drum sample plugins. Anything that's basically running in real time, you want to bounce this on its own audio track. And same with Elastic Audio, for instance. Again, if you're not too familiar with some of these process, find some tutorial online. But all this needs to be done before you send it to the mixing guy. Okay, so at this point, our ready for mix session is now ready to be cleaned up. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a save as version of this one, and let's call that our first step. Reason to do this is during the cleanup process, you may easily screw something up and delete something you're not supposed to, so you can always go back. Plus, since this is our final edit version, again, you don't want to. One of the things we're going to do is get rid of all the playlists, and so you want to be able to go back to that. So let's make a save as. So of course, go to File, Save As. We're going to call this one say Cleanup Prep. Now, the one thing you want to make sure is, since this is only a Pro Tools file, so a .ptx, this session still will make reference to the audio files in the audio file folder of the main session. So make sure that you do save it in the main session folder, and let's verify that. So this being my main session folder here, there is the .ptx file that we just named Cleanup Prep. Now, I also want to point out that, again, this is not going to be our final shrunk session. This is only a step in between. So at this point, we're not reducing the size of the session just yet. We're just cleaning up. Step number 2, delete tracks you don't need. That includes aux tracks. If you bust some drums to an aux input or guitars, etc., we don't need that. Just remove all those aux tracks. Master faders, same thing. Also, make sure that you get rid of all your aux sends. MIDI and instrument tracks. If you've bounced those MIDI and instruments earlier the way you're supposed to, then you don't need those tracks anymore. Any inactive, even if it's audio, and muted tracks, you don't want to leave your mixing engineer guessing. If a track isn't meant to be heard, delete it. If you're the last decision maker as far as all the edits are concerned, then you should know if something needs to be heard or not. And remember, this is a save as session, so the original session is still untouched. Now, of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. For example, it could be an alternate version of a lead vocal, for instance, in the event that there needs to be a radio-friendly version to be printed. In cases like this, make sure that the tracks are labeled properly, even add notes in the comment section. Clean up your tracks. Delete any unused and muted clips. Now, the exception applies here as well. If certain clips are meant for alternate version, of course, put them on an alternate track and label it properly. But other than that, once again, if anything is not meant to be heard, get rid of it. Now, when it comes to cleaning your tracks up, I feel a couple of things need to be addressed at this point. One of them is, should you or should you not consolidate your tracks? You may be dealing sometimes with some pretty heavily edited tracks, and you may also feel compelled to consolidate them because it does look a bit untidy. Now, I'm sure everyone's going to have a different opinion on this, so here's mine. If you're not absolutely 110% sure of your edits, I'd say leave it alone. Don't consolidate. More often than not, I'll be hearing, on vocal tracks, either a missing breath or a cut breath, or sometimes no breath at all. And it would be a simple fix as trimming the track back, or the clip rather. Now, if the whole thing is consolidated, that you can't do it anymore. Not that you can't fix it, but it's an unnecessary waste of time to do that. So I would say, of course, use your best judgment, but when you don't have to, just leave it alone. Earlier, I did mention, though, that sometimes you have to move session from DAW to DAW. In that case, of course, bouncing, is necessary if you want your tracks to stay in sync, which is the idea. Now, from an editing standpoint, of course, bouncing and consolidating, the end result is the same. So when you do have to consolidate or bounce, then make sure that your edits are flawless. And then the other issue is, or are fades. Should you or should you not fade? Well, of course, generally speaking, a fade is necessary most of the time, to avoid clicks and pops between transitions or between edits. But not all edits or not all transitions require a fade. Sometimes adding a fade will actually make the transition audible when it was perfectly smooth without it. So once again, use your best judgment. More often than not, a fade is necessary, but when it's not, I'd say leave it alone. Again, opinions will vary on that. However, I think one thing that everybody could probably agree on is don't fade your tracks individually at the end to maybe in an attempt to create a fade out. Leave that alone. You want to leave that to the mixing engineer. Matter of fact, I usually leave the mastering engineer to do that. You never know until sometimes the last minute how you're going to want the song to fade, and so you don't want to take shortcuts. Now, of course, if tracks need to be cleaned up at the end, somebody talking or any kind of noise, of course, clean that up, trim it, but just leave it alone. All right, step 3, in no particular order, by the way. Delete all your unused playlists. Earlier we talked about playlists briefly, and basically they are the placeholder for all your alternate takes, from which you build a comp track. So to display them, for instance, you remember earlier, clicked on playlist here on my drums, for instance, and these right here are all the different takes, therefore now called different playlists for all my drums. Now, a playlist is considered to be unused. Well, first of all, a playlist is simply what you see on the track in the edit window with a bunch of edits in it. That's a playlist. A playlist is considered unused when it's not showing up on the main track, the main playlist, on your edit window. So if they're hidden, they're considered unused. So those are the ones we need to get rid of. So to do this, it's pretty simple. All you got to do is click on that little arrow on the right side of the nameplate here on your edit window. Doesn't matter which track you do this on. Click on delete unused, and then they all show up here in that little window. This is basically the list of all the different unused or hidden playlists in your session. So click on the first one, go to the bottom, shift click on the last one, that selects them all, hit delete, and that does the trick. Now to verify that all the playlists are gone, what you can do if you want, you can click on playlist again here to try to display them. And as you can see, they are now all gone. Now, my step number 4 here has to do with plugins and real-time processing, which is something else where opinions are going to vary quite a bit because everybody, works differently, have different workflow. But generally speaking, any real-time effects or processing need to be rendered. And this for 2 reasons. The first one is that it saves processing power. You don't want to leave a track with elastic audio enabled on it, for instance. And then you can't also assume that your mixing engineer has every single plugin ever made, though it would be nice. But generally speaking, you want to get rid of all the real-time processing. Plus, at this stage of the production, if you haven't committed to your sounds or timing, then you're probably not ready to mix. So again, generally speaking, just get rid of it. Now, if you have a special effect or any kind of special delay on the track that you're really married to, then of course, there's always exceptions to the rule. So you can leave that. I told you guys to get rid of all the aux tracks earlier, sure, with exceptions, and that's one of them. But of course, be sure to label it properly. If you have, another common one is, say a telephone effect on the vocal, for instance, and you may have spent some time tweaking that effect. My recommendation then would be to bounce that sound to its own audio track, bounce the effect. But then also, I would keep, the track, whatever it is, aux or audio, onto which you have the plugins that you use to make that sound, because you never know if that needs tweaking later and your mixing engineer does happen to have this plugin, then it's already right there and you can just tweak it then. So what I would do then is I would just deactivate the track and then, of course, label it, make a comment, make a note. So in that case, you would just treat it that way. Otherwise, just get rid of all the plugins. Now, again, I can't stress enough that you need to communicate with the mixing team, because some people may want to pick up wherever you left off. So they probably wouldn't want you to keep all the plugins on there. You never know. Again, everybody works differently, so make sure you communicate. And then one last thing too that seems to be overlooked because it's fairly recent feature. So for all Pro Tools 10 and users and up, real-time clip gain, which is very convenient, sometimes tend to be overlooked as far as being a real-time effect or real-time process. So that all needs to be rendered. Okay. All right, moving on to the next step. Delete unused audio. Now, we've already gotten rid of all the unused playlists, which are all the playlists that are obviously not in use, meaning not showing up on your window. Unused audio, same concept. Any clip or file that does not show on your main playlist, on your main window, your main edit window, is considered to be unused. And this is exactly what we're trying to get rid of. So to do this, it's pretty simple. You can either learn the shortcut Shift-Command-U, or you can open your clip list on the right side of the edit window here. Click on that little arrow at the top to get the submenu. Go to Select and select Unused. Now, when you do this, you'll notice that in our clip list, we have a bunch of clips and subclips that get selected. Those are all the ones that are considered to be unused. So what do we need to do with this? Well, we need to get rid of it. To get rid of it, again, pretty simple. I guess that would be another step, maybe step number 6, will be to clear that audio. So again, another shortcut, Shift-Command-B, or same submenu. Click on here on the clip list submenu and hit clear. Now, this right here is pretty important. We get 2 options here aside from canceling. Either delete or remove. Now remember that we made a save as session. So that means that this particular session right here still makes reference to the files and clips, well, files actually, in the original audio file folder. So what that means is if you were to hit delete, what that does is it actually gets rid of the entire files that belong to this audio file folder that are considered to be unused. And when we said delete, it actually deletes it completely from the hard drive. So that's typically what you don't want to do. Yet I realize it is one way to shrink your session folder, but that's not a way to do it. Because what if you need to go back, to the original, some of the original sessions or your final edit session, and need to do some further editing? Well, some of those clips will be gone because you deleted them through this session right here. So what you want to do is you want to remove them. So simply hit remove. All that does is remove them from the clip list. Now, if we were to take a look at our original session folder here, the main session folder, this video tutorial right here, you can see that we've actually not shrunk the size of it. I've actually increased it by a few megs here. Now, this is simply due to the fact that we've created another Pro Tools session, and then there's probably a few session file backups in there. So no big deal, but that's obviously not what we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce the size of it. So there's still one more step to shrink the size of our session, and this is usually the step that gets overlooked because people think they got rid of actually some audio files, which in fact didn't happen. So our last step here in the size reducing process of our session here is to make a save copy in. If you don't do it, then as you've seen a second ago, the size of your original folder still hasn't changed. So to do this, go to File, Save Copy In. Don't do a save as, save copy in. And then you're going to get prompted with different parameters to adjust. Now, before we get into this, again, definitely make sure that you communicate with your mixing engineer as far as what their requirements are. Find out what version of Pro Tools they're working with. This is your first parameter right here. If you click on the little drop-down menu right here, you get different options because, of course, the features were different from version to version. I'm working on 10, so that's why it shows up as the latest for me. If I send this to somebody who works with 8 or 9, for instance, then I would just sort of downgrade the session version using this parameter. Then the next one, the session parameters, basically nothing different than when you create a new session in Pro Tools. However, again, make sure that you understand and know what sampling rate your mixing engineer works with. If any downsampling needs to happen or any bit depth changes, so make sure you know that ahead of time. Other than that, just leave it the way your session is. And then last but definitely not least, make absolutely sure that under items to copy, audio files are enabled, because basically what this will do is all the audio files, all the audio clips that are currently in use in this session will actually get copied to, again, a brand new session folder, a brand new audio file folder. And of course, the idea here was to get rid of all the ones we didn't need. So once you've made sure all your parameters are set properly, simply click OK. Now it's going to ask you where you want to save it and, give it a name. So I'm simply going to put it on my audio drive right here. And then I'll just call this tutorial video final for mix. And then we're going to hit save and basically let it do its thing for a second. All right, done deal. So now let's take a look at exactly what we've done. So if we look in our Finder, so this right here, this is the old session folder, which, as you can see, is still roughly around 4 gigs. This one right here is the one that we just created with our save copy in. So let's take a look at the info here and look at the size of it. There you go. So we went from close to 4 gigs here to now less than 2 by removing all the extra audio we didn't need and saving a brand new session folder. Now, of course, be sure now that this right here, this is the one that you're going to upload and send. Okay, don't get those confused. So as far as the cleanup part and the size reduction of the main session folder, we're done. So feel free to leave the room. But at this point, I'd like to go a few steps further and maybe give a few pointers as far as how to make a session as presentable as possible. Now, of course, this is going to be a matter of preference. So by all means, leave some comments, chime in and let us know how you like your sessions delivered. You may also be required to prepare a session a certain way by a mixing team. Even in the post-production world, for instance, you'll be dealing with typically a large track count, so organization and tidiness is definitely a must. In any case, having a very presentable session will save everybody some time, therefore money, and will definitely earn you a callback. So now, some of those pointers may be obvious, some others may not. So let's take a look here at what we can do to make a session as presentable as possible. All right, so for one, of course, make sure you open the right session, the one that we just created with the save copy in. And then I'd start by putting all the track of the same instrument together. Put all your drums together, all your guitars, bass, etc., etc. Put all your kicks together if you use multiple mics, maybe kick in, kick out. Top snare, bottom snare, guitars. If multiple mics were used, make sure that not only the tracks are together, but that they're very precisely labeled. Maybe guitar 1, 57, guitar 1, 421, etc., whatever you used. This is very important because you don't want to treat each mic as if it belonged to a different guitar pass and then pan them and lose the integrity of the blend, the intended blend, and then more than likely get some phasing weirdness. Now, granted, it's pretty easy to figure out what tracks belong together, but save your mixing engineer some time. So by now you get the point. There is, however, another organizing tip that will save some guessing time. Very often, I'll get vocal clips sort of scattered around on different tracks when they should belong on the same track. If the labeling of the clips themselves aren't as accurate as they should be, which unfortunately happens a lot, it could take a while to reorganize. If I need to treat a particular section differently, EQ-wise or whatever the case may be, I find it easier to do that myself rather than having to guess if such and such clip belong to the same vocal, or maybe it's a double as opposed to the actual lead itself, for instance. Same with background vocals, for instance. If they're performed by the same singer and they're in the same harmonizing range, there's no reason to add the track count. You can keep them on the same tracks. I also find that color coding the tracks also helps to quickly identify instruments together. Now, I've mentioned it a few times already, but labeling the tracks accurately is a must. And don't be shy with the comments either. Better to be overly thorough than unorganized. Another thing, get rid of automation. Now, if you're married to a specific panning effect somewhere, of course you can leave it. Be sure to mention it in your notes or in the comments. But other than that, there's no need for automation. That's one of the first things that I do when I get a session. I just get rid of it. Now, something else that's important, make sure that there's space at the beginning of the session. Don't have the clips start exactly at the start of the session like this. Some systems will need to sync to a console automation, for instance, and need a few seconds to lock with it. So don't leave it like this. You can simply go to Event, Time Operation, and maybe just add a couple bars before the start of the first note here. There should be enough for both systems to sync up. And then maybe as a final touch, make a selection of the entire length of the session, then hit Option F. This will make it fit the length of the window, so the whole entire song. It's not a huge deal, but it'll open this way when the mixing engineer gets it, and it gives a nice overview of the whole thing. You could even shrink the height of the tracks to make them all fit the window, so that you get an idea right away of what you're getting into. And so now, see if we kind of take a look around on edit and mix window. Now we have a pretty nice looking session ready to be uploaded. So as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty much it. Now be sure to save it, which you should have done along the way, by the way, and then upload it. So thanks for watching. I hope this helped, and we'll see you soon.